She opened the bank statement, and her world collapsed. After 25 years of marriage, she discovered secret payments to a university. Her husband, a successful executive, was funding someone's education behind her back. Through tears and suspicion, a disturbing truth began to emerge. A story of betrayal, discoveries, and decisions that will change 3 lives forever. Prepare yourself for a revelation that will break your heart. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. 25 years of marriage, reduced to a piece of paper. That's how I felt that March afternoon while organizing documents for our tax return. I was always the one responsible for the household bureaucracy. Robert never had the patience for numbers that didn't directly involve his rising career. Ironic, wasn't it? An executive who conquered the financial market, unable to fill out a simple IRS form. "You do it so much better than I do, honey," he'd say, with that smile that for decades made me believe we were the perfect team. Among yellowed folders and old bank statements, I found something that shouldn't have been there. A paper that seemed out of place, as if it had escaped from another life, another story that wasn't ours. Substantial monthly transfers to an elite private university for over 2 years. Significant amounts leaving our joint account without my knowledge. How could a 52-year-old woman, who dedicated her entire life to her family, not notice such a hole in the budget? Simple. Blind trust. The silent disease that corrodes marriages from within with no apparent symptoms until the whole body collapses. The view, paper trembled in my hands. I don't know if it was from the breeze coming through the window or the tremor that suddenly took over my body. Robert was secretly funding someone's education. Neither of our children studied at that institution. Peter had already graduated college 3 years earlier, and Megan was studying abroad on a scholarship. The feeling of betrayal was immediate, like a punch in the gut that leaves you breathless. "Calm down, Helen. There must be an explanation," I tried to tell myself. But the little voice of intuition, the same one I ignored so many times during my marriage, was now screaming like an ambulance siren. Something was wrong, very wrong, and I, with my annoying tendency to avoid confrontation, to keep the peace at all costs, knew I was facing my greatest dilemma. Seek the truth, or settle into the ignorance that had served as my blanket for so long. I put the statement in a separate folder away from Robert's eyes. I needed to think, to devise a plan. I was no longer the impulsive young woman I once was. Years of motherhood and married life had taught me that the best battles are won with strategy, not emotional outbursts. In the following weeks, I began my silent investigation. I started watching Robert's every move with eagle eyes. The password-protected cell phone that was never left unattended, the calls always answered away from me, the multiplying overtime hours, and the frequent mentions of a certain assistant I had never met. "Lucy is helping me with that special project," he'd comment casually while I served the dinner I had carefully prepared. "That's nice, dear," I'd reply, swallowing not just the food, but also the growing suspicion. One night when Robert went out for a business dinner, something that had become far too common for my liking, I decided to search his home office. I'm not proud of it, but the urgency to know was stronger than any remnant of marital ethics that might still exist. Among meticulously organized papers, a trait I had always admired in him, I found receipts from expensive restaurants on dates. He claimed to be working late, restaurants we had never frequented together. My heart raced. The first concrete evidence that something didn't fit the perfect story I believed I was living. Our town's traditional fall festival was approaching. For 20 years, ever since we moved here, we had attended this event together, celebrating local traditions. The aroma of cider donuts, the folk performances, the music filling the town square. It was one of the few times we saw Robert truly relaxed, away from work pressures. To my surprise, he announced during breakfast, "Helen, I won't be able to go to the festival this year. An unavoidable business trip came up." I took a sip of my coffee, which suddenly seemed more bitter. "A trip? Right now? The festival is our tradition." My voice came out weaker than I wanted. "That's exactly why I'm telling you in advance. I know how much you enjoy it, but this client is very important. You understand, don't you?" His tone was soft, almost rehearsed. And the worst part? I did understand. I always understood. Always accepted. Always put myself second because, after all, his success was the family's success, wasn't it? How stupid of me. "Of course, I understand," I lied, with a smile as fake as his excuses. Business can't wait. When the day of the festival arrived, defying all my non-confrontational tendencies, I made a decision. I wouldn't go to the event. Instead, I followed Robert. I wore discreet clothes, put on sunglasses and a hat. Ridiculously obvious, I know, but it was the best I could improvise. I saw him leave the house with a small suitcase, get into the car, and drive off. I followed him in my own vehicle, keeping a safe distance. To my surprise, he didn't go to the airport. He drove for about half an hour until he reached the campus of the university mentioned in the statements. He parked and walked purposefully to the campus coffee shop. He met a young woman, probably in her 20s. From where I was, I could see she was pretty, with dark hair and a bright smile. They hugged for too long for a casual greeting. My stomach clenched into a painful knot. The conversation between them seemed to flow with an irritatingly natural intimacy. Robert smiled in a way I hadn't seen at home in years. Spontaneous, genuine, without the weight he seemed to carry when he was with us. And then, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The young woman wore a necklace. Not just any necklace, but one identical to the one Robert had given me for our 15th wedding anniversary. A piece he had sworn was exclusive, designed especially for me. Exclusive like me, I suppose, I muttered to myself, with a bitter laugh that masked the tears threatening to fall. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. There I was, hiding, like a criminal, spying on my own husband. That scene was enough. I drove home with a weight on my chest that felt like it was crushing me. I didn't need to see any more. The message was clear as day. There was someone else. A young, bright woman with her whole life ahead of her. Someone Robert secretly financed with money that should have been ours, for our future, our security. I spent a sleepless night, tossing and turning, trying to find an explanation that didn't involve the most obvious betrayal. When Robert arrived the next day, excitedly talking about successful negotiations in a city he never set foot in, I watched the performance with almost clinical detachment. How was it possible to lie while looking someone straight in the eye? 25 years together, 2 children raised, a shared life, and there he was, fabricating an alternate reality with the skill of an award-winning actor. In the days that followed, I sought information about the university. Through an old friend who worked in administration, I discovered something that only intensified my anguish. The young woman I saw with Robert was an engineering student, considered brilliant by her professors, and even more revealing, her tuition had been paid in full by an anonymous benefactor for over 2 years. These weren't just recent payments. It was an established relationship, nurtured over time, while I lived in complete ignorance. Instead of confronting Robert immediately, I decided to use my organizational skills, the very ones he appreciated so much when it came to managing our home, to plan my next steps. The initial anger gave way to a colder, calculated feeling. If he could play this game, so could I. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer, supposedly to discuss the paperwork for the new house we were planning to buy. In reality, I wanted to understand my options if everything fell apart, and all signs pointed to that. During that consultation, the second twist came. I discovered Robert had opened a joint account with someone else, using funds that should have been earmarked for our retirement. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes who had probably seen stories like mine hundreds of times, explained that I had rights, that I could claim part of those assets in a divorce. Divorce. The word hung in the air like a specter, terrifying and yet strangely liberating. I, who had dedicated my entire life to building a family, was now contemplating its end. What an irony of fate. The town's annual summer fair was approaching. Another traditional event we used to attend as a family, before our children left home and before Robert became so busy with work. I decided to go alone. perhaps to prove to myself that I could still find pleasure in the little things, even with a broken heart. Fate, however, seems to enjoy the theater of the absurd. As I walked among colorful stalls, the aroma of grilled corn and funnel cakes in the air, I accidentally bumped into her, the young woman from the coffee shop. Our eyes met briefly, and I noticed something disturbing. She seemed to recognize me. There was a spark of recognition in her eyes, followed by what looked like guilt. Instead of walking away, driven by an impulse I didn't understand myself, I decided to approach her. "Hello?" I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Are you enjoying the fair?" She seemed surprised by my approach but answered politely. "Yes. It's my first time here. It's all very nice." "First time in town?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "No, I've been studying here for a few years. At the State University." A lie. I knew exactly where she studied. But I never had the chance to come to this event before. "I see. Do you work too? Or just study?" "Just study. I have financial support." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "That's good. It's hard to balance studies and work." I paused deliberately. "Do you know many people in town?" "Some. Mostly from college." She seemed increasingly eager to end the conversation. "Oh, and I know your husband from his company. Robert is a mentor to me." Mentor. The word hit me like a slap. The farce was right in front of me, shameless, dressed in polite euphemisms. "How interesting," I replied, maintaining my composure. "Robert never mentioned mentoring young students. He's very discreet," she said quickly. "Well, I need to go. Now, it was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Helen," I completed. Helen Matthews, assuming Robert's last name is Matthews for consistency, though not explicitly stated before. A flash of panic crossed her eyes. "The pleasure was mine, Mrs. Matthews." As I watched her hurry away, a strange calm washed over me. Now I had a name for the face that haunted my thoughts. Olivia Anderson. And she knew who I was, which meant Robert probably talked about me. What kind of story did he tell? Was I the cruel, controlling wife who didn't understand him? The cold woman who didn't satisfy his needs? Or just a shadow? A passing mention? An inconvenient obstacle in the life he truly desired? The following months were an exercise in self-control. I watched Robert become increasingly distant, coming home late, making excuses for weekend trips and evening meetings. Meanwhile, I began silently rebuilding my independence. I resumed the accounting course I had dropped when we got married to support his career. "You don't need to work, honey. My salary is enough for both of us," he had said. And I, naive and in love, believed that was love, not control. The classes 3 times a week became my sanctuary, a space where I wasn't the betrayed wife, but just Helen, a dedicated student with a future ahead, even at 52. I made friends, rediscovered the pleasure of learning, of exercising my mind beyond household chores and the social obligations that came with being an executive's wife. One Saturday morning, while Robert was supposedly playing golf with colleagues, I received an unexpected call. It was someone from the university's registrar's office, congratulating us on the investment in education and inviting us to the graduation ceremony of a scholarship student. The staff member mentioned that the student had named Robert as her official sponsor to receive honors at the ceremony. "There must be some mistake," I replied automatically, my calm voice contradicting the inner turmoil. "My husband doesn't sponsor any students." An awkward silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, I apologize. Perhaps I contacted the wrong family. Isn't Mr. Robert Matthews your husband?" "Yes, he's my husband." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. "Well, he's listed in our records as the financial sponsor for the student Olivia Anderson. She nominated him to receive an honorable mention during the graduation ceremony as thanks for his support throughout her studies. Olivia Anderson." Now the ghost had a full name. And not only that, my husband would be publicly recognized for his support. The humiliation seemed endless. "I see. There must have been some confusion, but I'll check with my husband. Thank you for letting me know." I hung up the phone and allowed myself a moment of pure despair. I cried like I hadn't cried in years, deep sobs that seemed to come from the depths of my soul. I cried for the young woman I was, for the choices I made, for the lost time, for the broken trust. And then, when the tears dried, something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, intense like an open wound, but alongside it grew something new. A fierce determination, a clarity of purpose I had never felt before. It was time to stop being a spectator in my own life. At the traditional regional food and wine festival, an event that brought together all the local high society, I ran into Teresa, an old acquaintance who worked as an executive assistant at Robert's company. After a few glasses of the award-winning local wine, her tongue loosened. "Helen, how are you handling this whole situation?" she asked, her tone of confidentiality exaggerated by the alcohol. "What situation, Teresa?" I replied, feigning ignorance, but sensing I was about to discover more pieces of the puzzle. "Well, the arrangement." She seemed genuinely surprised by my question. "Everyone at the company talks about it. I thought you knew." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of practice at social events had taught me to hide emotions behind a polite smile. "Teresa, dear, you know how private I am. Robert and I don't discuss his work matters." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "It's about Christine's daughter, his ex-girlfriend before you. They say when the mother died, he took responsibility for the girl. Financially, I mean." "Daughter?" The word struck me like lightning. Not a mistress, but a daughter? A child from a previous relationship I never knew existed? "Teresa, what exactly are you talking about?" My voice trembled slightly now, the mask of composure starting to crack. "Oh my God, you really didn't know." Teresa covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "Helen, I'm so sorry. I never should have mentioned it. Please, forget what I said. It must just be office gossip." But it was too late. The seed was planted, and an alternative explanation began to take shape in my mind. One that, while still painful, was less devastating than the romantic betrayal I had imagined. This new information changed everything. Could it be possible? Had Robert hidden a daughter from me all these years? Why had he never told me? And if it was true, did that mean the young woman I saw him with, Olivia, could be his biological daughter, not his mistress? Doubt consumed me, oscillating between conflicting feelings. There was the betrayal of trust. Hiding something so significant for so long was unforgivable. But there was also the possibility that his actions, though secret, were motivated by a sense of responsibility, not illicit passion. I decided to hire a private investigator, using my personal savings, money I had squirreled away over the years, hidden even from Robert, an emergency fund I never imagined using this way. The investigator, a taciturn man of few words, guaranteed absolute discretion. On the local holiday celebrating the town's founding, with its traditional town parade, I watched Robert receive a text message that visibly disturbed him. He paled, his hands trembling slightly as he reread the text. "I have to go," he announced, standing up abruptly from the bleachers where we were watching the parade. "Work emergency." "On a holiday?" I questioned, knowing perfectly well it was a lie. "International." "Markets don't stop, Helen." The rehearsed excuse, delivered with a tense smile. "Don't wait up for dinner." My investigator later confirmed that Robert went to meet Olivia at a hospital. She had been in a car accident. Nothing serious, but enough to trigger a desperate rush from a worried father. The photos showed Robert in the hospital hallway, talking intently with doctors, his face a mask of genuine concern. These images, more than any other evidence, convinced me. This wasn't the behavior of a lover. It was the desperation of a father. The puzzle started to make sense, and with it, a new wave of hurt washed over me. Not the pain of infidelity, but the deeper pain of exclusion. Why had he never trusted me enough to share this? After 9 months of anguish and investigation, as we prepared our traditional Christmas Eve dinner, I decided it was time for the final confrontation. Our children were coming with their families, and before the house filled with the festive chaos of grandchildren and cheerful conversation, I needed to hear the truth from my husband's mouth. I found Robert in his home office, organizing some last-minute gifts. The man I thought I knew after 25 years of marriage, but who now seemed like a stranger. "We need to talk," I announced, closing the door behind me. He looked up, surprised by my tone. "Did something happen?" "Who is Olivia Anderson?" I asked directly, without beating around the bush. The shock on his face was instant. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, hands suddenly still. For a moment, it felt like time froze. Then, slowly, he sat down, his body heavy as if carrying the world on his shoulders. "How did you—" He didn't finish the question. "Does it matter? I know you pay her college tuition. I know you meet with her regularly. I know she had an accident recently and you rushed to the hospital. I know she's graduating and you'll be honored at the ceremony." I took out the bank statements, the receipts, the investigators' photos, all the evidence I had meticulously collected for months. I spread them on the desk like cards in a morbid game. "What I don't know, Robert, is why you lied to me all these years." He stared at the papers in silence, his breathing uneven. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "She's my daughter." Even though I already suspected, hearing the confirmation hit me like a punch. "Your daughter," I repeated, my voice almost a whisper. "A daughter you hid from me for 25 years of marriage." "It wasn't like that, Helen." He ran a hand over his face, a gesture of deep exhaustion. "Olivia is Christine's daughter, a woman I was involved with before I met you. The relationship ended, but a few months later I found out she was pregnant. Christine didn't want me to be part of their lives. That was her condition. She said she was in a new relationship, that the new partner would take on paternity, and that my presence would only complicate things. And you just accepted that?" The disbelief in my voice was palpable. At the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. I was young, scared, focused on my career. I signed the papers renouncing legal paternity, but I made a financial arrangement. I sent money monthly to an account in Christine's name. It was the least I could do. "And when we met, why didn't you tell me?" He looked away, ashamed. "In the beginning, it didn't seem relevant. We were falling in love, building our own story. And then came Peter and Megan and our life together. Time passed, and the longer it went on, the harder it became to tell." "And when did you decide to reach out to her? When did that happen?" "About 3 years ago. Christine died. Cancer. Olivia was 19 and about to start college. She found me. Said she always knew I was her biological father, that Christine never hid it from her. Just asked her to respect the agreement until she was an adult. The revelation was so huge, so absolute, I felt dizzy. I leaned on the desk to keep from falling. 3 years, Robert. 3 years meeting your daughter in secret, lying to me, inventing trips and meetings. I was scared, Helen." His voice trembled now. "Scared of your reaction. Scared of destroying what we had." "Scared?" The word ignited a spark of anger that quickly flared into a fire. "You know me so little that you thought I would deny a young woman the right to know her own father? What kind of monster do you think I am?" "That's not it. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Remember when we found out I had dated Monica before I met you? How hurt you were, how you said you didn't even want to hear about my past relationships. That was 20 years ago, a silly newlywed conversation. And you used that as an excuse to hide a daughter?" Indignation choked me. "No, Robert, don't turn this into my fault. The truth is, you were a coward. Too cowardly to take responsibility openly, too cowardly to trust your own wife." Tears streamed down his face now, but I felt no compassion. Only an immense void where love and trust used to be. "You're right," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I was a coward. And now I've lost everything, haven't I? You're going to leave me." Surprisingly, that question made me pause. Was I going to leave him? The answer that seemed so obvious hours before was now shrouded in doubt. Robert had lied, yes, for years. He had broken our trust in ways I never imagined possible. But he hadn't betrayed our vows in the way I initially suspected. And he had, albeit belatedly, taken responsibility for his daughter. "I don't know, Robert," I answered honestly. "I don't know if our marriage can survive this level of deception. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. What do you want me to do?" He seemed genuinely lost, vulnerable in a way he rarely showed. "I want to meet her," I replied, surprising both of us. "I want to meet your daughter, understand who she is, who you are with her, and then, maybe, we can decide if there's still an us to save." In the following weeks, as the town prepared for its annual street festival, I faced my own inner journey. I had to confront not only my husband's lie, but also my own prejudice and rigidity that might have led him to hide such an important part of his life. I re-examined my values, my concepts of family, of forgiveness. The meeting with Olivia was scheduled to take place during the spring festival, the celebration marking the beginning of spring. A new beginning, perhaps symbolically appropriate for the situation. I chose a light blue dress, my hair pulled back in a simple bun, no makeup. I wanted her to see me as I really am, without artifice. Robert was visibly nervous, alternating between absolute silence and unnecessary explanations about the festival, the weather, anything to fill the void of our damaged communication. We found Olivia near the main fountain in the town square. When I saw her approaching, I immediately noticed the similarities, the shape of her face, the way she walked, even certain gestures that were unmistakably Robert's. How had I never noticed before? "Helen," Robert said formally. "This is Olivia. Olivia, this is Helen, my wife." The young woman extended her hand, the formal gesture belying the emotion in her eyes. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you officially, Mrs. Matthews." "Helen," I corrected automatically. "Just Helen." I shook her hand and felt a slight tremor. She was as nervous as I was. The beginning was awkward. 3 people carrying the weight of secrets and revelations trying to find common ground. We walked through the festival, commenting on the attractions, the music, the weather. Safe. Banalities that avoided the elephant in the room. It was during a moment when Robert stepped away to buy drinks that Olivia finally broke the barrier. "I always knew about you," she said abruptly. "My mother had photos of you, newspaper clippings from the social events you attended with with Robert. She wanted me to know what kind of family he had built." The revelation caught me off guard. "Your mother kept photos of me?" "Not out of jealousy or resentment," Olivia clarified quickly. "She loved the man she married, my stepfather. But she wanted me to understand that Robert had gone down another path, formed another family, and that it would be unfair of me to show up and mess things up. So why did you contact Robert when she died?" Olivia smiled sadly. "Because it was her wish. On her deathbed, she gave me permission to look for him, if I wanted to. She said the agreement had been to protect me as a child, but now I was an adult and could make my own decisions." "And Robert, how did he react when you reached out?" "He cried," she answered simply. "Cried like a child when we first met. Said he had never forgiven himself for not being part of my life, that he had secretly sent gifts for all my birthdays. Gifts my mother kept until I was older enough to understand the situation." I felt something break inside me, not from pain, but as if a hard crust was cracking to allow something new to grow. Robert had never told me about the gifts, about how much he suffered in silence, and he never mentioned wanting to introduce you to me. The question came out more bitter than I intended. Olivia hesitated, clearly choosing her words. "He mentioned it several times, especially in recent months. But he always said he needed to find the right moment, that it was complicated. I admit, I even got angry, questioning if he was ashamed of me. It was never about shame." Robert's voice surprised us. He had returned silently, carrying 3 drinks. "It was about fear. Fear of losing the 2 most important women in my life because of mistakes I made. And in the end, I almost lost you both anyway." The look we exchanged in that moment contained more than words could express. Pain, regret, reluctant understanding, and maybe, just maybe, the first glimmer of forgiveness. The year that followed was one of slow and often painful reconstruction. Robert and I started couples therapy, a process he initially resisted, but which proved essential for us to relearn how to trust each other. Olivia graduated with honors, and I was there at the ceremony, beside Robert, when he received public recognition for his support. It was a bittersweet moment, fraught with conflicting emotions. Gradually, Olivia began to become part of our family life. We introduced her to our children, her half-siblings, in a carefully managed process that generated everything from initial shock and anger to eventually genuine curiosity and the beginning of tentative relationships. For me, every day was a new challenge. There were moments when the hurt resurfaced with full force, when doubt consumed me. What if there are more secrets? I'd ask myself during sleepless nights. How can I know the whole truth now? But there were also moments of clarity, when I understood that we are all made of layers, imperfect choices, mistakes, and attempts to get it right. Robert changed. The revelation of the secret seemed to free him from a burden he had carried for decades. He became more present, more honest, more vulnerable. And I changed too. The complacent woman who avoided confrontation at all costs gave way to someone who learned to demand truth, set boundaries, and value herself. I went back to work, finishing my accounting degree and opening a small practice that quickly gained clients. The money wasn't necessary. Robert continued to provide well for us. But the independence, the sense of self-purpose, was something I would never give up again. At a recent dinner, Olivia brought me a gift, a book about women who reinvented their lives after 50. In the inscription, she wrote, "For Helen, who taught me it's never too late to start over. With admiration and affection, your stepdaughter, if you'll allow me." Stepdaughter. The word I never imagined would be part of my vocabulary now brought a strange comfort. It wasn't the family I planned, certainly not the journey I consciously chose, but it was ours. Imperfect, complicated, built on ruins and rebuilt with belated honesty. Robert and I still have a lot to work through. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. It remains fragile, with visible cracks that constantly remind us of what was lost. But maybe that's how lasting relationships work. Not as immaculate fairy tales, but as works in progress, eternally unfinished, always requiring maintenance and care. As I write these words, in the office I set up for myself in our house, a space just, for me, a small revolution in our marriage. I look at the recent photo I keep on my desk. In it are all of us. Robert and I, our children, Peter and Megan with their spouses, our 3 grandchildren, and Olivia. An expanded, redefined family, still learning to navigate unknown waters. I'm 53 now. I'm no longer the idealistic young woman I once was, nor the resigned wife I became for so many years. I am a woman who faced betrayal, not the romantic betrayal I imagined, but the betrayal of trust, perhaps equally devastating, and survived. More than that, I was reborn. If there's one lesson I learned on this involuntary journey, it's that the hardest truths to face are often the ones that free us most. The confrontation I avoided for so long became the gateway to my own liberation. The pain I feared so much turned out to be the catalyst for a more authentic, stronger version of myself. I don't know what the future holds for Robert and me. What I do know is that I will never again be defined only in relation to him. Never again sacrifice my essence for the sake of apparent peace. The marriage we manage to preserve, if we manage it in the long run, will be fundamentally different. A partnership of equals, based not on comfortable illusions, but on uncomfortable and necessary truths. As for Olivia, we are building a relationship of our own, independent of Robert. A cautious friendship, born from the most unlikely circumstances, but no less genuine for it. I see in her traces of the man I loved, yes, but also a strength and determination I deeply admire. At the next spring festival, we will complete a cycle, 1 year since our first official meeting. Olivia suggested we celebrate together, a new ritual to mark not what we lost, but what we found along the way. And so we continue, all of us, navigating the complex labyrinths of family relationships, discovering that family isn't necessarily what we plan, but what we build with the imperfect. Pieces life gives us, secrets revealed, wounds healing, new beginnings sprouting from the ashes of what we once thought was true. Life rarely follows the script we imagine for it. The deepest revelations often arrive wrapped in pain. The most significant transformations are born from crises we would rather avoid. But perhaps it is precisely in the fractures, the imperfections, that we find our true strength, not the strength of one who never breaks, but the resilience of one who rebuilds, piece by piece, with a wisdom only adversity can teach. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see wrinkles that weren't there before this crisis, gray hairs that have multiplied in the last year, but I also see a sparkle in my eyes that had long faded, the spark of a woman who rediscovered her own worth, who learned that it's never too late to rewrite her story, and that, more than any marital fairy tale, is a victory no one can take from me.